breaking news right off the top. Do we have any jingle or song to hit that up with, please? Just into the MK newsroom. Hey guys, seriously, 2026, the new broadcasting deal for UFC is a record-breaking massive one. UFC signs an exclusive deal with Paramount to air 13 premium live events, don't call them pay-per-views, and 30 fight night cards live on Paramount Plus, with the potential future of some live streaming on CBS as well. And when you want to talk about money, how long did they say we are looking for $1 billion per year? They're going to get a little more of that, as this 7-year deal will cost upwards of $7.7 billion, a massive deal. Now, this also brings to the end, for the first time since UFC launched in 1993, the idea of pay-for-play, pay-per-view, as in this deal, Paramount also reported they will not raise the prices on their streaming service. I think it's $12.99 or $8.99 with ads. You get everything the UFC is offering. No Netflix, no ESPN, and this certainly on this Monday morning was a monster surprise in terms of breaking news. Luke Thomas, first and foremost, what does this mean to the sport, to the fans, to the fighters, to everything, following such a surprise curveball in the UFC rights negotiation?
Well, we have to unpack those piece by piece, because I don't think they mean the same thing for every entity. But let's just start with who we are as fans. And I don't know how getting rid of pay-per-view and putting everything under, I mean, everything's kind of already under one umbrella, but the basic idea is everything under one umbrella and getting rid of pay-per-view. I mean, the pay-per-view is how the UFC was birthed.
Sure.
In 1993. It is how it has made, I mean, if you grew up in the, a pre and certainly the post Ultimate Fighter era, pay-per-view was everything. It was the dominant way in which they made money. It certainly is. The numbered events are still marquee events, obviously. That hasn't changed necessarily, but it's been the linchpin of that business for basically as long as it's been around, perhaps up until recently. But the costs have obviously been a lot. And as we know, UFC is not the only combat sports game in town. Boxing is in pay-per-view. BKFC is in pay-per-view, and all the different, Misfits boxing and everything else. All these different things are, for the most part, in one way or the other, often behind pay-per-view, not exclusively, but often. And it just becomes overwhelming, and piracy has become itself, as a consequence, overwhelming. It was always a problem, but I think now it's been a different level. BC, we have this fresh quote. This came to us, by the way, from TKO Chief Operating Officer Mark Shapiro. Quote, "The pay-per-view model is a thing of the past," he writes. "What's on pay-per-view anymore? Boxing? Movies on DirecTV? It's an outdated, antiquated model. So it was paramount to us, forgive the pun, where it's one-stop shopping, especially for our younger fans in flyover states. Nice to call it flyover states. When they find out, wait, if I just sign up for Paramount Plus for $12.99 a month, I'm going to automatically get UFC's numbered fights and the rest of the portfolio. That's a message we want to amplify. It's on this level alone, BC, on this level alone, the end of pay-per-view is a monster W for, I think, the fans. And I kept paying pay-per-view. I know a lot of folks didn't. There was one time I certainly had to pirate when the UFC 301 was a mess behind ESPN Plus's paywall. I'm sure everyone on some level has pirated now and again, which speaks to that point. But not having to pay extra beyond what you had to pay for ESPN Plus, because remember, you had to pay that subscription fee plus what it cost on that end to do it. Now, I do have a question about that, though, BC, which is, obviously, Paramount and CBS are a bigger company than DAZN. DAZN is a minor entity relative to that. But I do recall DAZN getting into the market saying, we're done with pay-per-view. That's it. And then, a year or two passes and you got to pay for a pay-per-view even on top of what you get for DAZN. Could there be a world, BC, where they realize, this doesn't make a lot of sense? Because as our intrepid producer pointed out, this deal is worth $7.7 billion. As it stands today, Paramount's market cap is $6.6 billion. So the deal is worth more than the company itself. Now, of course, you're saying, well, yeah, they're making a bet that they'll make on the back end, through the life of this deal, than they will, paying essentially upfront for it. Yeah, fine. I'm sure that's the gamble that they're making. But if you just do the math, and again, not all events are created equal, they're getting basically 25 million an event. That's the average.
Wow.
25 million an event.
Wow.
Are you gonna make all that back on viewers and sponsorship from what you sell on CBS and linear or on digital ads? Again, I don't know the answer to that. It's huge, but that's Paramount's problem to figure out.
Sure.
That's the executives. On the consumer side, massive W.
No doubt. And look, this is a major splash for David Ellison of Skydance, fresh off of the merger to acquire Paramount from the Redstones. And this, like you said, is really, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's about putting Paramount Plus in a huge way on the map in the streaming wars. And they're certainly going to raise the the image of that, the reputation of that in such a big way of this. And you just look at it as the ESPN deal, which will end at the end of this calendar year. That was 5 years, 1.5 billion. This is 7 years, 7.7 billion. So it'll be 1.1 billion per year. Now, as it stands right now, this is just the United States that this covers for UFC event, or maybe North America. I'm not officially sure. But one thing that was interesting in the CNBC story that was part of the breaking news of this is that Paramount is interested in buying UFC's international rights to pair with the US rights. The company said in a statement, Paramount will have a 30-day exclusive negotiating window for each country's rights when they're up for renewal, which is something Mark Shapiro said in the CNBC story. So that's showing you that Paramount is not just in for a little bit, they're all in. And Luke, we got to give credit to people, as you did on Twitter, like the MMA Draw, Kid Nate over there, Zach Arnold. They were ahead of the game in saying that Paramount was in these negotiations when everybody else was. But I think a lot of us thought it would be a portion of the deal, or maybe they're using one company to raise the price. Dude, this was fairly shocking to wake up to on this Monday morning as a CBS Paramount employee to see that they've got the full boat moving forward. So I think I said it earlier. It's 13 PLEs. It's 30 fight nights. No word yet on where Dana White's Contender Series is going to go, on where Zuffa Boxing is going to go. Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated did report, according to a source in TKO, that those are going to be separate deals that they're still looking to make moving forward. But for the UFC, for TKO, for Paramount even, this is so massive. This is so record-breaking. Luke, do you think that we really have a chance of elevating the sport with this deal? And I say that cautiously because the UFC being on ESPN was massive for exposure, having SportsCenter lead with it, having, the desk on the ground out there. But now you're eliminating pay-per-view, which I really do think is the biggest aspect of this news, along with the selling number, the price that it took to get there. But do you see this as being a potential bridge to the casual fans to really push the UFC brand and the sport moving forward?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, that's a little harder for me to say. I mean, okay. So I actually think that's one of the more important questions. It's like people are like, oh, and we'll talk about the fighter pay component because I do think that's a big one, right? If for no other reason than they just can't literally do it the way that they used to do it, right? There's no more pay-per-view points unless they tie it to ratings. But anyway, separate conversation. How big is it to be on CBS? Obviously a very big deal. I mean, dude, CBS has had a really interesting history with MMA. That the Strikeforce Nashville brawl took place on CBS. And now they're in the 1.1 annually billion dollar business, I should say, with the Ultimate Fighting Championship. It's a big network, but that's only for, as I understand it, let me pull up the press release, BC, because I read this earlier and I was like, am I imagining this? I don't know that I am. Here's what it says on the press release. Starting in 2026, Paramount will exclusively distribute UFC's full slate of 13 marquee numbered events and 30 fight nights via its direct-to-consumer streaming platform, Paramount Plus, with select numbered events to be simulcast on CBS. They're not even saying all the numbered events are going on CBS, BC. They're saying some of the numbered events.
Yep.
Can you really beat ESPN's mainstream casual fan exposure on Paramount? You can definitely do it on CBS. Yes. Can you do it on Paramount Plus? I don't think the answer to that is yes. And they're saying that some of the numbered events, what we now commonly understand as pay-per-view, are going to be aired there. So I don't like, it seems to me that the big play here is Paramount wants Paramount Plus to be bigger than it is. You can get some NFL games on there. I already have a subscription. I already watch Champions League on there. They're trying to get something that is seasonal, or sorry, I should say not seasonal. It's year round. And which, UFC fans are very, very loyal to UFC, at least historically speaking. They're trying to raise the profile. But are you going to a place, if you're UFC, that already has a bigger profile? Well, for CBS, sure, I can buy that. For everything else, I don't think the answer today, right now, is yes. Let's see if they can grow the pie to maybe change that equation.
Dana White will be on CBS Sports HQ, by the way, today at 3 p.m. Eastern time to talk about that more. Crazy because so many of us thought that Netflix was going to be a big part of this deal, that they were going to continue the recent trend of major big boxing events and not signing an exclusive deal with a promoter, but being in a situation to potentially do 6 to 8 UFC pay-per-views. I hope, for what you just said, that CBS will end up simulcasting, a few of these really big shows to help that push across there. But Luke, this is very interesting for TKO's continued really takeover of the sports business, media and broadcasting rights environment here, because if you're a WWE fan, you previously paid a subscription for the WWE network to get everything. Then that moved to Peacock. And if you subscribe to Peacock, you got all the pay-per-views or PLEs, what have you. Now, WWE and TKO just signed that massive deal with ESPN where you now have to pay the ESPN Plus subscription. And then additionally, you have to pay for pay-per-views, basically. It's like a reverse of where the model was for the last 11 years. And now you've got UFC flipping that around completely. So definitely MMA fans are going to win big here, because you have to believe that Paramount could have jacked up their subscription price, and maybe over time it will grow like ESPN Plus did. But first and foremost, Luke, I got to get your reaction to not needing ESPN Plus anymore after you feuded with that streaming service for years. And I do want to get your reaction at Netflix not being a part of this.
Well, I mean, I was sitting here puffing my chest out on Twitter being like, I can't wait to cancel my subscription. But then I thought about it. I'm not so sure that I can right away. Let's talk about that. First of all, we don't know where Road to UFC, not that I watch The Ultimate Fighter, but I'm curious to see where it ends up. But certainly one thing that would be of interest to me is Contender Series.
Sure.
So just those three alone, like, do they go to Fight Pass? Are they also going to be on Paramount for an additional amount of money? Or are they just going to throw in with a deal later? Or are those properties staying on ESPN Plus? I don't know the answer to that. More to the point, BC, what about PFL here? Now, if you're PFL, you got a question you got to ask yourself. Is it better that UFC is gone because you could say to yourself, well, now we are the only MMA game in town, and we're going to be obviously much less costly than UFC, and maybe there's a deliverable there that they like. On the other hand, if you're ESPN and you're out of the UFC business, why do you want to stay in the MMA business? So, there's a real question there about what's going to happen. Plus, Chris Mannix reported earlier today that this has nothing to do with the TKO boxing deal. So if you're TKO, you already have, starting in, I guess, 2026, as you indicated, WWE going over there, right? Maybe Contender Series and some other properties stay over there. And it's possible that TKO boxing, Zuffa boxing, ends up back over there. In which case, I don't know that you can readily just get rid of it right away. I think there's a question for it. But, BC, if I don't have to pay $80 freaking every month, it makes it a lot more tolerable long term, even if I recognize that the ESPN Plus service sucks the backside of my balls. You know what I'm saying?
Your pelotas. Yeah. What do you make of Netflix not jumping in after looking like they were going to be the premier carrier of the biggest fights?
I don't know what to make of that. I think we need some additional reporting. It was weird that they were everyone who was talking to people on the inside of the story was like, okay, it's going to be some ESPN Netflix arrangement. I think we even said that on Friday's show. That seems like that's the closest arrangement. We had known from the MMA Draws reporting in some other places that Paramount was an outside player, but we didn't know that the equation had changed so substantially. I don't know what it says about Netflix, BC. I mean, they're still in the WWE business, right? And they're going to be, I guess, for a little while longer on some level, the Jake Paul business. So it's not like they're out of combat sports.
Well, they're in the Raw business in the US, and then
Yes.
Netflix has the full WWE package internationally.
Internationally. Okay, fair enough. But I guess what I would say to that is it's hard for me to not notice that they had this momentum for a deal they were building, and that it all got blown up with some kind of turkey getting sideways with the female Netflix executive, and then nothing was really ever the same after that exactly. So I don't know. I mean, who knows? Could Contender Series end up on there? I seriously doubt it. I think they're looking for more marquee stuff, but it's just funny, dude. Like you think it's good, dude. Never forget. Before the UFC signed with Fox, Dana White put out a video on the UFC's YouTube channel saying, folks may not remember this. I remember this very distinctly, saying that the UFC was going to sign a deal with ESPN and it was going to change the face of the future of MMA forever. And then they didn't sign one. They actually went instead and signed with Fox Sports. Like there's always these last minute, direction changes that can come out of nowhere. And besides, man, like based on what the numbers we were hearing, 1.1 billion versus what I was hearing and reading was, 700 to 800 million annually for what they were looking at between all the different properties for ESPN. I mean, dude, it's a no-brainer. I mean, how do you turn down $1.1 billion annually? That's such an enormous sum of money that you don't have to share with the fighters. Like, how do you turn that down? It's a game-changing amount of money.
I mean, no word yet on what this means for the fighters, but loss of pay-per-view points, pay is probably stagnant moving forward, right?
Well, I mean, let's talk about the pay component because I don't know what to say here. I think that two things I would say. First, if you're a UFC entrant or, you make 50 to, 200K-ish somewhere in there for a fight, I don't think this deal affects the way you get paid at all, right? I mean, again, we'll have to see long-term. I don't know, but right away, nothing strikes me. The question that is more interesting to me is the high end. I think that's where I'm like, what does this mean? Now, someone might noticeably say, well, weren't pay-per-view buys so down that A, the UFC just got rid of them, and B, it wasn't. So for folks who don't know how pay-per-view points works, they can change this up per deal. But let me give you an example of how it works. It's a ladder, okay? So any buys that, let's say Ilya Topuria fights on pay-per-view, and I'm going to make something up, BC, sells 1 million pay-per-view buys. How does that work? Well, he gets a certain dollar amount from 0 to 200K buys. And then he gets a higher amount from, let's say, 2 to 300. And then an even higher amount for 3 to 5. And then usually after that, or certainly after 7 or 800, it just becomes, I think, like a flat fee, not flat fee, but, the number doesn't keep going up at that point. It gets to a certain level. And so it's an escalating tier. And so where you fit in that tier is how you get paid. Now, as I indicated, the pay-per-view buys have apparently been so low that many fighters weren't even getting the next tier up triggered in their deal. And so in a case like that, how does this change? What does this change mean? The answer is maybe nothing, but they're going to have to calculate it differently, right, BC? Like they're at least going to have to figure out a new formula for how that goes. And I don't know the answer to that. And by the way, I want to be clear here, like they're signing this deal, this is the second part about it. I mean, if you're an NBA player and the NBA signs a $1.1 billion deal, the players are going to get upfront 49% of that. They're going to get 49% of that. Upfront, the UFC fighters are going to get nothing, right? Nothing, not a penny. And this is where I go back to. I don't know what the right answer is to preserve all of the interests of fighters. Is it the Ali Act? Is it unionization? I don't know. And even if they had formed a union, BC, it's not clear that they would be able to extract 49%, rent from them. But what I will say is, even if it was 25%, let's just say, so that's conservatively closer to 300 million annually that would be distributed to the fighters. That would be a game-changing amount of money, and they don't get that because they couldn't even be bothered to do that. So this is the fruits of their lack of labor. They get to enjoy an absolute nothing burger on a $7.7 billion deal. Congratulations, fellas. You really outdid yourself with that one.
Yeah. Shout out to Hainato Moicano, or as Shab will call him, Mukano, for giving back the cash that was rightfully his. Wow. Final question on this, Luke, and then we'll get into our rundown and all things fluffy. Shout out to Anthony Hernandez, by the way. Wow. Kicking off, if we assume that this deal will start in January, and they tend to go big in their intro, obviously the first UFC on Fox card, which was head-to-head against Pacquiao Marquez 3 on pay-per-view and boxing, gave us the heavyweight championship, Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos Part 1. I don't remember offhand what the first UFC on ESPN card was. Wasn't it TJ Dillashaw?
It was the one in Brooklyn, TJ Dillashaw, Henry Cejudo.
Okay.
It was on ESPN Plus, technically.
So wait, wasn't that a pay-per-view? And then the first on ESPN linear was Cain versus Francis?
Yes, but the first one of the ESPN era, I was at that card. It was at the Barclays Center. I was there.
Yes. So those are very big events. If you had to, knowing the UFC schedule of who might be available, or maybe who you think they would like to really launch this with, who would make sense to kick this off? Connor's back in the pool. John's back in the pool. We try not to talk about those guys too much anymore. What do you think?
Well, by the way, I mean, just think about it logically. That White House event's going to be on CBS, right? Has to be.
If they have it, I mean, I still don't know if that was like part of a negotiation ploy. You know what I mean? Like, hey,
right.
we'll see.
Who knows? All right. Well, to the extent that they have it, it'll be on pay-per-view. But it's the same question like with the White House thing. Like, you know, it's a little early to tell. I mean, I guess we're not too far from January. I don't know. It'll be a title fight. I'll say this. Say what?
Put it on Jan 6 is what I'm saying, Luke. All right, let's just go for it here. Let's go all.
No, but it will be a title fight. Like, it will be a title fight. I don't know which one it'll be, but it'll be a title fight.